Good morning and welcome to Live Without Limits. Stop holding yourself back. Your breakthrough starts here. And today we're talking about, and we're going to dive into the topic that many of us struggle with, but most of us might not fully understand why sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go. And I'm your host, Davida Shinsky. We've all been taught that strength is about holding on. We're told to stay strong, endure, and keep pushing forward no matter what. But what if true strength isn't about holding on to everything, even though things that weigh us down? What if it's actually about having the courage to let go, letting go of things that no longer serve us? In this episode, we're going to explore how letting go can actually make us stronger mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We tend to hold on to things long term. And maybe what we need to do is let go, because if you stay in the past instead of living in the present and what's good for you now, then you will always feel anger and hostility in some way or another. And it also creates jealousy of others because you feel as though you're inadequate. So understanding the idea of strength and how to make it work for you. When we think about strength, what do we typically picture? Maybe a bodybuilder lifting heavy weights, or someone persevering through a tough situation. Society often tells us that strength is synonymous with endurance. It's about fighting, resisting, and never giving up. But sometimes we find ourselves holding on to things or situations that drain us. We might hang on to a toxic relationship, a job that doesn't fulfill us, or an old identity that no longer fits. The problem is that this kind of strength isn't real strength. It's a form of attachment that prevents us from evolving. Imagine a tree that refuses to drop its dead leaves. It holds on to the old, but it prevents it from growing new branches. Holding on can keep us stuck, even when our true potential is waiting for us on the other side. I want you to think about a time in your life when you were holding on to something that wasn't serving you, maybe a relationship, a belief, or even a past version of yourself. How did that feel? I know from personal experience that when I was holding on to negative thoughts or outdated career goals, it felt like I was running on empty. I wasn't making any progress because I was too focused on staying anchored in the past. We need to let go of the past, and thinking about how to let go of the past is one of the ways that we need to take into account how to take and look at the things that can get us where we want to be. We talk about the laws of attraction. We talk about affirmations. And when you think about it, a lot of what happens from the time we're young children is that we're scripted in the roles that we're supposed to play, whether or not they truly fit us. And when that happens, we feel inadequate when we see someone else who has far surpassed us or what we believe they have done, because you never know what someone else is experiencing behind closed doors, what makes them a high achiever, or what makes them question everything that goes on. We only know what goes on in our heads through our experiences and how we deal with it. And I have a friend that I've talked to many times, and she has been in a bad relationship for over 30 years, mainly because of the way she was raised and what happened. Even her sister was in a bad marriage. And when they wanted to get divorced, her parents went and stayed with them to talk them out of it. And the best thing they could have done for their daughter was to let her get a divorce, because it was a bad relationship. He had invented something that he and his brother went into business together. And what happened was he had no health insurance, that by the time her sister found out she had breast cancer, it was too late. And her sister had other issues going on in her personal life, all stemming from the kind of home environment that they grew up in. And it's so sad, but sometimes we have to take a look at the environment that we have as children and how it plays on our heads and how we end up repeating the same patterns in relationships, and how do we expect to change that, to make our lives better, to have healthy relationships. The first thing you have to do is be willing to recognize it. And if it means getting rid of the people in your lives that are toxic, it's the best thing you can do with them. I literally would have nothing to do with my baby sister if it wasn't for the fact that she controls the estate, and to some degree I depend on her. But if I didn't, she and I would have no relationship, because she's petty, she's jealous, she steals, and all of this stems from that she's just exactly like my mother. And it goes back to my grandmother. The sad part is that if you look back on ancient history and what went on in those times and how it affected people, and the sad part is because we keep repeating the same issues from generation to generation, that we tend to hold on to that anger and resentment and pass it on to others, especially our children. And the only way that you can control it and deal with it and not keep passing it on is literally to let go, to be aware that you need to live in the present and strive for your own goals, and understand what's happening in your head and why you keep that anger there. The psychology of letting go. Now, let's talk about the psychology behind why it's so difficult for many of us to let go. For most of us, letting go is hard. It's emotionally draining, and it can feel like you're losing part of ourselves. That's the deep fear of loss. If you let go, who are we? What's left? A lot of us come from our attachment to certain things, to people, or even identities. Attachment theory, a concept from psychology, suggests that we develop deep emotional bonds early in life that can impact how we handle relationships and experiences later in life. If we're attached to something or someone, we often become afraid of letting go because we fear the void it will leave behind. But here's the truth: clinging to things that no longer serve us actually create more pain and discomfort in the long run. The fear of letting go is much worse than the fear of the unknown. We're all heard of people who stayed in bad jobs or unhealthy relationships because they were comfortable or familiar. That's a form of attachment, and it's holding you back from reaching your full potential. A good friend of mine once worked in a job that made her miserable. She stayed for years because it was secure, even though it drained her emotionally. She kept telling herself, "This is my safe zone. I'm strong for sticking it out." But in reality, she was living in a constant state of burnout. It wasn't until she made the decision to leave and pursue something that aligned with her passions that she found real strength. Now, understanding why we tend to hold on to the things that keep us from being and reaching our full potential is the fact that we are afraid to get out of our comfort zone, that we need to learn to stretch. When you're willing to get beyond your comfort zone, when you're willing to explore new things, when you're willing to be open to growth, then you're going to, it's like the saying says, when you close one door, another door opens. And what does that truly mean? That means that by letting go, you're giving yourself permission to take the next step, to move beyond just comfort zone, to be willing to stretch. You know, when I started my business, it was all about, originally I wanted to go into being a therapist, using the transactional analysis groups and the psychodrama groups to do therapy, but I didn't have that master's and I didn't have that PhD. But my situation was that I do not do well on tests, and therefore, based on my grades, I struggled to get an education, because education at that time was not geared to help someone with a disability. And once I was allowed to do these things on my own, I went and got the certifications I needed to become a life coach or a career coach. That opened the doors to me actually being able to work within the industry. And also, another aspect of it is that I was in a master's program for rehabilitation counseling, which is employment counseling, which also gave me the understanding. And I was able to see how the industry was changing and adapting, and how to learn to adapt my business. That when I first actually started doing a podcast 20 years ago, you didn't even have video in it. It was all done as audio. It was just known as internet radio. It was before the term podcast was even coined. And that was an outgrowth of technology. And when you look back, when I entered the workforce in the late 70s and the early 80s, everything was offline, becoming a speaker. If I wanted to have a video, I couldn't just send them to my podcast and say, this is what I talk about. I had to have a video of me doing a presentation, and that meant hiring someone to come in and do the video. That meant putting together a media kit to send it out. That also meant having a book to promote myself, to promote my topic. And all of that meant you had to have money up front to be able to do this. I've got a number of books now out, and I've also got a number of videos out there that I knew that once being able to utilize this as a tool, that and using video, then I was able to move into that portion of it, to deal with it from the standpoint of where I'm going now, what is it that I want to do that is going to get me where I want to be. And I also find that I was able to adapt and incorporate technology into my business. But I was always open and willing to look and willing to explore. And that is much of the reason why I have been able to get beyond what my family looked at as my inability due to my disability. But the thing is, it has to come from within. You have to be able to look at yourself. You have to learn what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, how to utilize people in your life who can really complement you and help you get where you want to be. Now, let's talk about the benefits of letting go. So why is letting go so important? What benefits come from it? First, let's go open the door for personal growth. When we release things that are holding us back, we create space for new opportunities, new ideas, new relationships, and the best part, we create room from personal transformation. We've all been there, right? We're stuck in a routine, a pattern, or a belief system, and we feel like there's no way out. But the moment we let go, something amazing happens. We give ourselves the freedom to grow and evolve. Letting go is also about emotional freedom. Think about the emotional weight of holding on to grudges, anger, or fear. It takes so much energy to keep those negative emotions alive. Letting go of them is like shedding a heavy coat. You instantly feel lighter, freer, and more at peace with yourself. Letting go brings clarity to peace when we're no longer tangled up in the past, hurts, or future worries. We can finally see things clearly. We can make decisions based on who we are now, not who we were or who we think we should be. Now, let's talk a little bit about this topic because I think it's very important. Now, our day-to-day experiences influence who we are. So we change from day to day. So who you are today is not who you were a year ago. Look at an innocent child as they get from day to day, how wide-eyed and open they are to learning new things, to experiencing things. And think about all of the things that they're taking in like a sponge and learning. Think about it. You have to learn to first when a baby's born, their movement is very limited. As they get a little bit stronger, they start to move a little bit. They start to turn over. They start to push themselves up to crawl. They start to pull themselves up to walk. And they're so fearless, you have to watch them 24/7 because they can easily get themselves in trouble. How many times have you heard someone that their child got out the door and went to the lake and drowned? Or they went to the pool and got in the pool and drowned. It's because they don't fear anything at that age. They don't understand. That's why we have to be very protective of someone at that age until they learn what they can do and what they can't do so that we can give them the strength and the knowledge to be able to make the right decisions. So how to let go, some practical tips. Now, let's get some practical. How can we actually begin the process of letting go? Acknowledge and accept. The first step is to acknowledge that you're holding on to something that is not serving you. Sometimes we stay in denial about it, but once we can accept that something isn't working, we can begin to take action, reflect, and journal. Journaling is an amazing tool for processing your feelings. Write about what you're holding on to and why it's so hard to let go. What would your life look like if you could release this? Reflect on how this attachment is keeping you stuck. Forgive yourself and others. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone else off the hook. It's about freeing yourself. When you forgive, you release the hold and that anger or resentment has on you. Start with forgiving yourself for staying in situations longer than you should have. Set boundaries. Letting go doesn't mean you have to completely sabotage with people or situations. Sometimes it's about setting healthy boundaries. Maybe you're still attached to a person, but need to set limits. Embrace the unknown. The fear of letting go is really about the fear of what is next. But life is full of new possibilities. Instead of fearing what you're losing, embrace what you're gaining. Sometimes the best things in life come when we step into the unknown with an open heart and mind. I want you to pause right now and think about one thing that you've been holding on to. Maybe it's an outdated belief, a toxic relationship, or an unfulfilled dream. Write it down. Now ask yourself, what would it feel like to release this? What would it free up in my life? And talk to yourself. You know, I think it's a lost art that, and I can remember many a times when I'm alone, I will go and be inside myself, thinking and dealing and facing up to the things that I went through and how it affected me and how I can change. And sometimes you gotta really, if a family works because each person expects the others to react in a certain way. And there is something called in TA, it's the triangle of the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim. And if you allow yourself to remain a victim and allow these people to continually persecute you, and you have what it is you have one person that's constantly belittling you, and the other person stands up for you a little bit, but they're not truly in your corner because these two are working together against you. And finding strength within yourself to face up to it, to say, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to allow them to take away my strength. And I'm not going to allow myself to remain in a toxic relationship. One thing I found is that I always knew that having children was not a priority in my life because it would have been easy for me to continue to do with a child what was being done to me. And I came from a family that was very, very toxic. I had a mother that psychologically abused. I had a father who physically abused. And growing up in that environment, my comfort zone was very easily to end up with someone who would abuse me in that way. And in the couple of relationships that I was in, I was very much aware of what was happening, and I knew that was not what I wanted. And I knew and I had walls that went up because I grew up with parents that did to me what they did. And even though I knew I couldn't fight against them, I knew what I didn't want in a relationship, and I knew what to be aware of and how not to. And even though my sister controls the purse strings, I have found a way around her that I only depend on her to a limited. We have virtually no relationship. We very rarely talk to each other because she's the type of person that when she's talking to you, she only wants to do the talking, and she does not want to hear what you have to say, and she's going to jump down your throat. And when you confront her about the things she does, first thing she does is start turning it on you. And no, I knew early on that because my mother allowed her to get away with doing the things she did, she always feels as though she's right and will continue to do them. And there is no reason for me to have to put up with someone who's going to treat me that way. And sometimes, as much as we hate it, that family is family, sometimes they're your worst enemies, and you have to stay as far away from them as you possibly can. So what's the takeaway from today's episode? Letting go is a form of strength. It's the kind of strength that allows us to move forward, to evolve, and to create the life we truly want. It might not always be easy, but it's always worth it. If there's something in your life that you've been clinging to, I encourage you to consider letting go, because let me say it this way. As always, remember that your journey is your own and you have the power to shape it. So thank you for tuning in today. So until next time, live without limits and remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go. If you're ready to release something in your past that's keeping and holding you back, I'd love to hear from you. So reach out and share your story and let's start the journey of transformation together because only you can control your future. You need to live your life that you were meant to live. Do not allow someone else to live their life through you because what was unique to them is not unique to you and is not the person that you were meant to be.